CBS News headquarters in New York, this is the CBS Evening News, with Roger Mudd substituting for vacationing Walter Cronkite. And in Washington, Eric Severide, Bob Schieffer, Connie Chung, Phil Jones, Daniel Shore, Bruce Hall in Charlotte, North Carolina, Bob McNamara in New York, and Betty Ann Bowser in New York.
Good evening. President Ford's trial balloon full of Watergate pardons settled slowly back to earth today, punctured and tattered by critical congressmen, commentators, and columnists. Bob Schieffer reports from the White House.
The first word of the about-face came as Republican congressional leaders emerged from a 2-hour meeting with the president and said there was no study of pardons underway. Senate Minority Leader Hugh Scott said the president had issued a clarifying statement and asked him to read it.
The announcement yesterday by Mr. Hushin concerning study of the entire matter of presidential clemency and pardons was prompted by inquiries to the White House press office concerning Mrs. John Dean's reported statement in reference to pardoning of her husband and similar public statements on behalf of others. Such a study is, of course, made for any request concerning pardon of an individual. However, no inference should be drawn as to the outcome of such study in any case.
Did that mean, in fact, that no pardon study was underway?
No study. None that I know of, and I think that they are not.
And I think what the president is saying here is that if he receives in due course and in due form a request for consideration for a pardon from any of these people in this rather large class, that they will not be thrown in the wastebasket, that they will be considered on their merits, each of them.
No sound cameras were allowed during yesterday's briefing when White House spokesman John Hushin was asked if the president was considering such pardons. Transcripts show that he responded, "I am authorized to say the entire matter is under study." Today, Hushin said the president had never considered blanket amnesty for the Watergate people. Another source here said the statement yesterday was simply a trial balloon, which was launched in haste and which just as quickly collapsed. Bob Schieffer, CBS News, the White House.
This afternoon, Mr. Ford flew to Pinehurst, North Carolina for the dedication of the World Golf Hall of Fame. The president managed to get in around there and on the first hole outdrove pros Arnold Palmer and Gary Player. The president's 220-yard tee shot was topped, however, by Jack Nicklaus.
Do you have anything for headaches?
Yeah. Take 2 of these.
Arthritis pain formula. I have a headache, not arthritis.
Doesn't matter. Arthritis pain formula is great for occasional headaches, too. Look at the label.
Also relieves headaches. Must be strong.
You bet it is. APF has more pain reliever in it than most headache tablets. Arthritis pain formula.
Hey, thanks. Arthritis pain formula is great for headaches.
Arthritis pain formula. Great for headaches, too.
I'm cleaning my oven while I sleep.
Presenting the Easy Off way to clean your oven overnight. Spray Easy Off on cold oven before you go to bed. Easy Off self-scours the tough grease, self-scours while you sleep, with concentrated cleaning power to cut through and soften the baked-on mess.
So in the morning, you just wipe sparkling clean.
Get Easy Off, America's #1 oven cleaner, for easy overnight cleaning or fast daytime cleaning in minutes.
An Eastern Airlines jet preparing to land on a stopover at Charlotte, North Carolina, crashed this morning, killing 69 persons. 13 survived. Bruce Hall reports.
The Chicago-bound Eastern Airlines DC-9 jet with 82 people aboard crashed and burned 2.5 miles from the end of the runway at Charlotte's airport. The flight had originated in Charleston, South Carolina, and an Eastern spokesman said the plane was being guided into Charlotte by radar due to patches of ground fog. One witness said the plane just came in too low, hit a cornfield, skidded for several hundred yards, struck a tree, burst into flames, and exploded. Federal Aviation spokesman said radar controllers were in contact with the pilot moments before the crash. He gave no indication of trouble. 69 people were killed, 13 survived, including the co-pilot and a stewardess.
The extent of damage is massive, and quite a few dead people. Bodies were strewn all over the woods and thrown as far as 200 or 300 feet from the aircraft.
What was the condition of the survivors you saw?
A massive trauma injury, burns and fractures. Although there was one gentleman who was just appeared to have broken legs. He was thrown clear. He was thrown about 200 feet over into some honeysuckle.
Did you talk to any of them?
Yes, I talked to 3 of them. Well, most of them were in shock. Nothing really coherent except the one individual. He'd said nothing about the crash. He said it appeared that everything was normal, and next thing he knew, he was in the woods.
The injured were rushed to nearby hospitals. Most of those who survived the crash are in serious condition this evening. The survivors apparently were thrown from the plane before the explosion and landed in a clump of trees. The FAA said several flights had landed with no trouble just before the Eastern flight began its landing approach. The controller said the plane was making a routine radar approach when it suddenly just disappeared from the radar screen. The National Transportation Safety Board says they're sending a team to Charlotte to investigate the crash. Bruce Hall, CBS News, Charlotte.
Among the presumed dead on the Eastern crash was the news editor of this broadcast, John Merriman. Since 1966, John had been intimately involved in the preparation of and responsible for the accuracy of the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite. Tonight, Walter described John as one of the most dedicated newsmen and thorough professionals I have ever known. As an editor, John Merriman had few peers. He loved strong, simple sentences. He insisted on clarity. He revered the power of words, and he had strong views strongly held about what news was. John was 50. He began with CBS as a page in 1942. He was a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania and was the current president of the Writers Guild of America East. He was a bachelor, a gourmet, and a well-known traveler. There were few places in this country he could not advise on which beach to seek out, which small hotel to stay in, which picturesque ferry boat to take. He was on vacation when he died. He had been with his mother, Mrs. Hiram Merriman of Walterboro, South Carolina. John was reliable, perceptive, funny, sympathetic, and vigorous. None of us here can do without him. Last week, we reported on the story of a Vietnam veteran, John Gabron, and the mental torment he and some others home from the war have suffered. It's called flashback, and in Gabron's case, it brought him serious trouble in civilian life. Gabron was in court today for a pre-trial hearing. Harold Dow reports from Los Angeles.
Johnny Gabron had been in jail 5 weeks, arrested for holding 3 hostages at gunpoint during what his psychiatrist termed a flashback. Gabron believing he was back at war, the hostages Viet Cong. Today, his lawyer, Leonard Weinglass, told a court hearing that Gabron had had 2 more flashbacks in a jail isolation cell with no one there to help him. Weinglass asked Judge Gilbert Austin that Gabron be put in the custody of Veterans Administration psychiatrists. And Austin, visibly upset over the lack of medical care in jail, agreed. Said the judge, referring to Richard Nixon, if a man that almost wrecked the country can be pardoned, this man, Gabron, can be treated medically.
Finally, somewhere in the system, we found a judge with a little bit of heart and a little bit of soul who did what should have been done on the very day that John surrendered himself to the police, and that was return him to the Veterans Facility for treatment.
Late today, the prosecution appealed the judge's ruling to a higher court. Johnny Gabron will still be prosecuted for the hostage incident. Whether he will get psychiatric help instead of isolation in the county jail depends on the higher court ruling. Harold Dow, CBS News, Los Angeles.
Mary, how much that was, Mary? Where's our Rolaids?
Acid indigestion.
No. Try these. They're good. Good, maybe, but they're not Rolaids.
In this medical report, Rolaids active ingredient was medically recognized safe and effective, taken as directed. Rolaids, with no extra ingredients not intended for your stomach, consumes 47 times its weight in excess stomach acid. Rolaids ingredient, medically recognized, safe and effective.
Look around you. Your world has changed. Quality and craftsmanship are fading away. One thing will never change. Mercedes-Benz. Watch it move. Hear its quiet. Feel its pride in craft. That's engineering. Mercedes-Benz. A classic quality that won't compromise. A kind of beauty that won't change. That's Mercedes-Benz. Engineered like no other car in the world. Now look around you.
The returns are in from yesterday's primary elections in 13 states and the District of Columbia. In general, incumbents fared well, but 3 congressmen lost their seats. Republican Glenn Davis of Wisconsin and Democrats Robert Tiernan of Rhode Island and Bertram Podell of New York, who incidentally went on trial today for perjury. New York Democrats also repudiated their party's slate makers. Betty Ann Bowser reports.
Niagara Falls, last June, the New York State Democratic Committee nominating a ticket headed by millionaire Howard Samuels, an ethnically balanced slate picked by organization and liberal Democrats. Last night, they were all defeated. The people put their own ticket together. For governor, Congressman Hugh Carey, who defeated Samuels. For lieutenant governor, Mary Ann Krupczak, the first time a woman was nominated by a major party for a statewide office in New York. For State Attorney General Robert Abrams, the Bronx Borough president, defeating the party's choice. The people also chose Ramsey Clark, former U.S. Attorney General in the Johnson administration, to run against Republican Jacob Javits. Clark, a political maverick, ran an unorthodox primary campaign, defeating the party's nominee and another unknown, limiting individual contributions to $100 apiece, spending nothing on television. For Meade Esposito, one of the state's most powerful Democratic bosses, the repudiation of the official slate was a bitter pill to swallow.
As far as I was concerned, I went through this campaign like a ballet dancer, doing a dance on a shallot roast without trying to dent a cherry.
Isn't this a crushing defeat for the organization?
I don't believe so. Carey is organization, Krupczak is organization. I don't believe so at all. But may I say this, that it can't be politics as usual anymore. People are fed up with politics.
Betty Ann Bowser, CBS News, New York.
District of Columbia voters in their first Democratic primary for mayor chose incumbent appointee Walter Washington over Clifford Alexander. In the heavily Democratic city, the nomination is tantamount to election. In neighboring Maryland, a congressman running for the GOP gubernatorial nomination was a surprise loser. The victim was Lawrence Hogan, the first Republican member of the Judiciary Committee to come out for the impeachment of Richard Nixon. Connie Chung reports.
Hogan's political future ran into trouble when he became the first Republican on the House Judiciary Committee to publicly announce his vote to impeach Richard Nixon.
Now, this vote may result not only in my defeat in my campaign for governor of Maryland, but may end my future political career.
Despite his stand on impeachment, many thought Hogan would run away with the Republican nomination. And on the campaign trail, Hogan largely ignored his primary opponent, Louise Gore, focusing instead on attacks against Governor Mandel. Louise Gore, who first introduced Spiro Agnew to Richard Nixon, quietly gathered strength among party regulars. Today, both candidates agreed Hogan's role in the impeachment controversy was a political liability.
I thought that when the Supreme Court came out 8-1 against the president, when he admitted his wrongdoing and the new tapes were issued, and then he resigned, I assumed that what had been a liability had been eradicated. But unfortunately, I was wrong.
It wasn't that he cast his vote for or against the impeachment. It was the grandstand play he made on his announcement. It was that he turned what was a very solemn and very serious vote that he had to cast, one way or the other. He had to cast it, but he took the advantage of turning it into what many of us thought was a political circus.
Now Louise Gore faces a tough fight to unseat Governor Mandel, who won his primary easily. Connie Chung, CBS News, Washington.
Democratic leaders of the Congress today made plans to come back into session after the election and deal with an ambitious legislative program, including tax reform. The leaders expect a recess in mid-October for the election.
I'll admit it, I've got a few pounds of extra weight, and it can be just like carrying around a ball and chain. Who needs it? So, I'm exercising and eating smart at every meal, starting with the Special K breakfast. It gives me protein plus vitamins and iron, all for less than 240 calories. That's right, a whole breakfast for less than 240 calories, and it's delicious. The Special K breakfast, it'll help me get rid of this darling little ankle bracelet.
I'd like you to take a close look at this bread. The color is light brown, and the texture, a unique blend of whole grain wheat and whole grain rye. There's bran, defatted flaxseed, and other nutritious ingredients, including pure golden honey. This isn't ordinary bread. It's Roman meal, the good-tasting light brown bread. Roman meal, natural whole grain goodness. The Roman Meal Company thought you'd like to know.
The Federal Trade Commission today charged 5 department store chains with retaining nearly $3 million in credits and overpayments due charge account customers. The stores include Gimbel's, Lord & Taylor, Neiman Marcus, Bonwit Teller, Bergdorf Goodman, and Lerner's. Most chains withheld immediate comment. The FTC said it will give the stores a chance to negotiate a settlement of its complaints before it holds any hearings. The Agriculture Department said today recent rains in the Midwest have saved much of the corn crop, but said the harvest will be 11% below last year's. The soybean harvest will be 16% smaller. Commodity brokers at the Chicago Board of Trade said that even with the new rains, they see no end to the upward trend in food prices. At the White House today, President Ford was host to the big labor leaders for the second in a series of meetings leading up to the Economic Summit Conference later this month. Phil Jones has that story.
The president opened today's mini-summit with the announcement that $415 million will be spent to finance 85,000 public jobs in high unemployment areas. This will double the number of federally funded public service jobs, and Mr. Ford pledged his continued attention.
I recognize the concern of many that unemployment might rise because of the policies we must follow to fight inflation. I am watching the unemployment rate very, very closely. This administration, as I said the other day, will act with compassion. We will not permit the burden of necessary economic restraint to fall on those members of society least able to bear the cost.
In one area, President Ford said again just what the labor leaders wanted to hear, that there will be no mandatory wage and price controls in the Ford administration's fight against inflation.
We had guidelines back in the days of President Johnson, and they didn't work. Price and wage controls will not work in this country. This diverse economy, this is a great big country, and the minute you put on price and wage controls, unless the control is absolute and complete, wages controlled by fiat from the government, prices controlled right down to the last local grocery store.
The labor leaders agreed with most economists that the administration's current policies of tight money and high interest rates are bad for almost everyone but the nation's loan sharks.
We regard the approach of tight money to the current problems of this economy is completely inappropriate, wrong, and not relevant to the real sources of the inflation. It's equivalent to treating a fever with a dose of arsenic, leaving the patient, I think, with a worse condition than he had before.
There was general labor opposition to any massive federal budget cutting. Most felt that this would lead to higher unemployment. And all were in agreement that inflation is hurting the little people.
Now, we have an administration that you have inherited. And I just say this here. They've had a track record. And a track record stinks. And you've got to do something, Mr. President. Some way has to be figured out to feed these people. There's no other way. You can't go out here, right here. In 10 office buildings, they're picketing for a lousy dime. Right in Washington, $2.05 an hour. How the hell can you exist on that?
Tomorrow, the Ford Economic Summitry moves out of the White House and to Atlanta, with the depressed housing and construction industry the subject of discussion. Phil Jones, CBS News, Washington.
Wall Street's worries about economic problems showed up today in another downward spiral in prices. The Dow Jones Industrial slipped nearly 4 points. Volume on the New York Exchange was 12 million shares. The average price per share lost 23 cents on the New York Exchange, 10 cents on the American. The Senate Rules Committee, planning to start hearing September 23rd on Nelson Rockefeller's nomination as vice president, has asked him to make public a financial statement of assets, liabilities, and net worth. The committee already has such a statement, but the chairman said the members think public disclosure is the only way to deal with questions of conflict of interest, and Rockefeller said he will comply. A Senate subcommittee headed by Democrat Joseph Montoya began hearings today on the administration's request for $850,000 for Richard Nixon's transition expenses. Daniel Shore reports.
It was an uphill battle all day for General Services Administrator Arthur Sampson trying to justify $850,000 in transition expenses for Richard Nixon under laws that never anticipated such a situation to senators whose constituents are resentful.
Over the last week or so, the mail that I have received and calls from my constituency, about 99 9/10% of them resent very much and are opposed to the Congress granting the requests made by President Ford.
These requests for funds are not on behalf of or for the benefit of Mr. Nixon as an individual. These funds are not intended to improve his financial well-being, nor will any be used to provide him purely personal services such as legal counsel. And I've been authorized to make that statement.
Not only were specific items in the Ford request challenged, but Chairman Montoya questioned whether the Presidential Transition Act could even be applied to one who hasn't completed his term.
I want you to know that we will accord every consideration possible to the former president, but we don't want to indulge in any excesses here.
The request for money for former President Nixon is undergoing a rigorous technical examination. But behind that is the fact that senators are getting mail from their constituents saying they don't want former President Nixon to get anything like $850,000. And Chairman Montoya says he's not likely to get much of it. Daniel Shaw, CBS News in the U.S. Senate.
Eric Severide has some views on the Nixon transition money and related matters in his commentary tonight.
It's clear by now that President Ford hasn't been a bridegroom on a honeymoon. He's been an apprentice test pilot flying a new machine with a lot of bugs in it, and in the crew. He has holdovers and newcomers. Some of the holdovers seem to think the previous pilot is still at the controls, and some of the newcomers are a bit confused and dizzy from the altitude. Mr. Ford can't get control of the government or public opinion until he gets control of the White House. He hit an air pocket with the early Nixon pardon and a fierce crosswind with the talk about pardoning everybody concerned. But to assume from this, as various dramatists and the public prints assume, that he just can't fly and can't learn is unfair because it's premature at the least. He inherited, after all, one of the most excruciatingly painful cans of political, moral, and legal fishhooks in our recent history, the case of Richard Nixon and Company. The Nixon pardon is accomplished fact. The backlash from Congress makes further Watergate pardons next to impossible. All this very probably makes it impossible for Congressmen to approve the overall sum requested of $850,000 to help Mr. Nixon through what is called the transition period. Congress is not likely to let Nixon have twice what Lyndon Johnson had. Not in addition to that gold mine called the tapes. Some may be pulled out for courtroom use, but Mr. Nixon holds title to them all. He can write his own version of recent history from them, and he can then destroy them. And so much for any objective account for future generations. The tape machines and the tapes themselves were bought, operated, and stored at public expense. But there's that act of Congress, the 1955 Presidential Libraries Act. Ex-presidents can keep their official records, and the tapes apparently are no different from pieces of paper under the law. Our ex-presidents aren't merely pensioned and granted guards and office help. They're handed as they leave a capital investment, potentially worth millions. They can write books from these materials, or they can sell them outright. The greatest soldier of them all, General Marshall, took away from government nothing but his purely private papers. He refused even to write his memoirs, and he died rather poor. Secretary of State Dean Acheson took only the private things. When he wrote books later, he had to ask State Department permission to see documents, some of which he had written himself. In his judgment, even the presidential libraries were improper and ought to have been held illegal. The times change, so do the standards, so do the men.
Portuguese commandos were sent into Mozambique's capital today to put an end to rioting that has caused a reported 200 deaths. A police official said most of those dead were blacks who were stoned, stabbed, or beaten to death. The rioting began in the black sections of the city. It followed and was apparently sparked by the white minority's protest over Portugal's decision to turn over control of Mozambique to a black guerrilla party.
Grandpa, it's time for lunch.
What are we going to have today? Elephants? I am Chef Boyardi, and I learned you need a little play and a little goodness to feed a child. good meat and cheese and a sauce made from fine ripe tomatoes. And spaghetti that does funny things. A mustache, John. Bravo. And before you know it, they have eaten a good hot lunch.
We have 6 clever and expensive lunches from Chef Boyardee. In Colombia, South America, when Juan Valdez plants a coffee tree, he works on it for 5 years before it grows its first bean. And even when the tree is mature, he must still work every day just to get the single pound of coffee each tree produces in a whole year. There are easier ways to grow coffee, but Juan is not growing the easiest coffee in the world. He's growing the richest.
The Philadelphia Phillies beat the St. Louis Cardinals 8-2 last night in St. Louis, but the 27,000 fans in Busch Stadium were there not so much to see a ball game as to see Lou Brock make sports history. Bob McNamara describes Brock's big night.
With the grace and speed of a leopard, 35-year-old Lou Brock has become baseball's premier base stealer. The St. Louis Cardinal outfielder is to base running what Hank Aaron is to slugging home runs. Last night, Brock stole 2 more bases and set 2 records. First, he eclipsed Maury Will's single-season record of 104 stolen bases, a record set in 1962. He also broke Max Carey's National League career base-stealing record of 738. Brock still trails Ty Cobb's 892 career stolen bases and is closing in on Eddie Collins' 743. Last night, after a first-inning single, Brock stole second base and got there safely for the 104th time. He went to third on an error. Then in the 7th inning, after another single, he broke Maury Will's mark as described by announcer Harry Callis.
There he goes.
After breaking the record, he was given the base he stole, and the game was stopped for 16 minutes. Following the game, Brock was asked which of the 2 bases he stole was the most important.
104 had a lot of meaning to it because 2 things happened at once. And something that mathematically you cannot put that together again, no matter which way you look at it. You establish a National League mark and at the same time tie a season high.
Brock says he expects to steal 10 more bases in the remaining 20 games of the season. And as he has found, there are frustrations on the road to records. When he attempted to steal his 106th base and break his own record last night, he was close, but still out. Bob McNamara, CBS News, New York.
That's the news this Wednesday night. I'm Roger Mudd, CBS News. Good night.
Digel has told you that occasional acid indigestion and heartburn are often accompanied by gas. Now, this report from the U.S. government confirms that the only ingredients recognized effective against both acid indigestion and gas are an antacid combined with simethicone. And that's exactly what every Digel tablet is. No antacid alone relieves like Digel does. Digel relieves acid indigestion, relieves gas too.
Insurance can be complicated, so the agent who sells you should be able to counsel you too. And that's the Hartford's business. For example, if you had a fire, would you have enough insurance? Or an accident, would you have the right coverage? Or if something happened on the road, would you have the right policy? All that is the Hartford's business. Your independent Hartford agent makes it his business to really know insurance, not just sell it. Insurance by the Hartford. You are the Hartford's business.
From CBS News headquarters in New York, this has been the CBS Evening News with Roger Mudd substituting for Walter Cronkite. Share the joys and heartbreak of growing up in the 50s when the new dramatic series Sons and Daughters premieres tonight at 8, 7 Central Time on CBS.
WLAC-TV, Nashville.
Good evening, I'm Chris Clark, and in the news tonight, at least 3 inmates remain at large from that prison break. Teachers walk out in Clay County, and your electric bill will increase steadily now between now and 1979. And leave it up to Ron Kaiser to find the dark cloud in the middle of the silver lining he's been forecasting for us. And Hope Hines has another report on the NIL, this time Bellevue School,
Bellevue High School,
coming up next on Eyewitness News.